Today's guest gave me guitar lessons before I even met him. And I remember the first time I ever saw him play live, I was looking at him as he came out on the stage, and even before he hit a note, I thought, oh, that poor bastard has absolutely ruined that Stratocaster by putting a Montreal Canadian sticker.
I should have put 24 on for each cup.
He's the king of boogie. David Gogo has agreed to be on my podcast.
Reluctantly.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the new album from David Gogo. Yeah. Available now on Cordova Bay Records. David Gogo has 6 Juno Award nominations and has been named Guitarist of the Year 3 times at the Maple Blues Awards. Yeah, available now on all streaming platforms and at davidgogo.com.
Reluctantly.
How are you, sir?
I'm very well, Dave. It's awesome to see you. It's been a while since we've been face-to-face. It's been even longer since we've been in person. It's always good to chat with somebody who looks so good in a hat.
Yeah, I am a cat in a hat, and there's that. Yeah, no, it's great, man. You know, like the pandemic kind of knocked the shit out of annual visits to towns as a musician. You know, usually I usually try to do once a year if I can to different towns. Time does fly when you're out there, but yeah, it's kind of upset the apple cart schedule-wise somewhat. But I am coming back at the end of November. We're just announcing. So
Edmonton Blues Society.
Correct.
St. Basil's, November 30th here in Edmonton.
Oui.
You've done a number of shows in Edmonton at, I seem to recall, was it the Polish Hall you played with Johnny Winter?
Yes, I think you had to puke twice and show your razor blade before they'd let you in.
It was an interesting evening. Was there not someone who had a medical episode?
I believe so, yeah, because we were kicking ass so hard they had no choice but to immediately clutch their chest and fall to the ground, projectile vomiting all the way.
This was before defibrillators were on the corners of the walls in the building too, I think. So.
Don't use a defibrillator, be a man.
And then, so I remember I show up at the Polish Hall. I'm visiting with you and everything, and Johnny Winter's playing, and you're playing and stuff. And if it was between sets or after the show or whatever, we go in to visit Johnny in his motorhome.
Yes.
Now, there's some significance before I get into the Africa hot environment inside his motorhome.
Yeah.
Is there significance to Johnny Winter's travel in a motorhome? Or I seem to recall there's something peculiar when it comes to Johnny Winter and his desire to, or was that just happened to be his green room sort of setup for that night?
It's kind of the green room. I mean, there was lots of peccadillos. I mean, I actually rode with them on the motorhome. I think after that trip in particular, from the Polish Hall, the next gig was either in Red Deer or Calgary. I can't remember right now. I did a lot of shows with Johnny over the years, so he had all sorts of peccadillos about exactly what time he has to eat. He'd always live on Eastern time, like New York State time. So he'd have to have dinner, you know, like if he was out west, he'd have to have dinner at 5 o'clock rather than 8 o'clock and all that kind of stuff. But the Winnebago was more just like, it was so expensive to rent a tour bus. So it was more like the green room, something that's comfortable for him, because him being albino and legally blind, it was just kind of a comfort level. Like you're always basically touring in the same thing, whether it's a different rental or not. So it was just a way to make ends meet, and it had to make sense for them.
With that particular stop, that was not the first time you'd played with Johnny. You'd been on tours with him before and met him before and that sort of thing. Do you recall the first meeting? And you're meeting Johnny Winter. So what is going through your head?
Well, he is one of my all-time musical heroes, both guitar-wise and vocal-wise, and just his stories amazing. That was the great thing about touring with him, was after I got to know him, was being able to bring up things like, you know, the fact that he produced 3 different records for Muddy Waters. The fact that he was a personal friend of Jimi Hendrix and played with him. You know, he played Woodstock. There's all these things to talk about. The first couple of years that I opened shows for Johnny, though, we never got to meet him. He had different management at the time, and they kept him sequestered. You just didn't meet Johnny. They had him doped up and you know, on every sorts of medication you could imagine, just to kind of push him out on the stage. And it got, I hate to use the word pathetic, but it got pathetic after a while. But this guy, Paul Nelson, who's no longer with us, started out as a guitar tech and recognized what was going on. And he kind of eventually ended up taking over in terms of management and just getting Johnny out there in the way he should be out there and getting him the respect that he deserved. So it was nice to have that happen near the end of his career.
like obviously we know the sex, drugs, rock and roll, all of the things that go with being a musician back in the day, starting in the 50s, in through the 60s, 70s, especially 80s, 90s, into the 2000s. It seems to be different. But do you figure with Johnny Winter there was that debauchery that happened, and then there was kind of a recovery stage sort of thing where there was a sense of, I hear about these musicians now that are touring and they have personal chefs and they have, all their green shakes and everything like that. Was there ever that ebb and flow, that wave of debauchery to sensible touring and stuff that you sensed with him? Or like was the guy you mentioned, was that part of his sort of deal with Johnny?
Yeah, it was more just trying to figure out how to keep the show on the road and to keep Johnny in a healthier state. Because I remember at one time, this might have been in Red Deer actually. I was traveling on my own, but I think opening, a dozen shows or something on that trip. So the first show of the tour, I showed up and say hello to Johnny. He loved King of the Hill, so I'd always walk on the Winnebago and go, huh? I can't believe it. A fellow Texan, Johnny Winter. And he'd know it was me. So, and so they would, yeah, at that time, he only had, I'm going to go back to the Red Deer thing. So he said to me, he goes, hey, David, guess what? I said, what? He goes, I got off with methadone. And I kind of knew that they were going to give him a placebo and slowly reduce it. I go, oh, yeah, how long were you on methadone for? He was 42 years. So he'd gone to England, like in the late 60s, and discovered that you could register as a heroin addict. And he got back to the States and told his manager at that time, hey, I want to do this. I'm in, Like he just really liked doing heroin. So they got him on methadone, and he just kept doing that forever. So, yeah, near the end of his life, they just started reducing the dosage and gave him a placebo. And he actually said to his then manager, Paul, he said, I don't know what it is, Paul, the last month or so, I'm just feeling great, man. Well, let me tell you a little secret, Johnny.
You mentioned Johnny's one of your favorite guitarists. Do you have a top three that you could could you start at number 3, and is Johnny in the top 3?
Well, there's Hendrix and Jeff Beck. Johnny's probably right up there, like I don't, it's not really like a horse race for me, but there's all the blues guys too that I used to love to get to see that aren't around, people like Albert Collins. We've still got Buddy Guy. He's on his last tour, but I used to go see and quite often open shows for all these great blues players and sometimes even sit in with them, like, Coco Taylor and John Mayall and all these people. So not a lot of them left.
Buddy Guy's still got his, he has a club.
Yeah, Buddy Guy's Legends in Chicago. Yeah, he's still there.
He's on his last tour, and it's the Swan Song thing. It puts me in the mind of B.B. King when he went through his last tour. Buddy though is B.B. would get up there and he'd just stay in his box and kind of and do that wrist wiggle sort of thing, singing the songs, and everybody knows the story that Buddy never sang and played at the same time and stuff. But it became more of a band show than it was a BB show the last time we saw him. And I always remember BB was there until the last person was out of the lineup for signatures and that sort of thing. And it was sad because the last time he was in Edmonton, he ended up not sitting at the chair at the table, meeting these fans and signing stuff. And it was unfortunate because at that time, my son, who I named Riley after BB King, and it would have been, great to have him there when Riley was playing, to have them, talking to each other as musicians instead of, the radio guy named his son after the legend sort of thing. But
yeah, well, just before I give an answer to that, I just want to mention that wrist wiggle was actually my nickname in high school.
Wrist wiggle. But it wasn't your Chippendales name.
Well, I opened for BB shortly before he passed away, probably that same tour that you're speaking of.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, at the end of the show, like, that's the last time I'm going to get to see this man. And so I like to tell the story on stage that, when he went to leave, I thanked him once again. And I had my son with me and even brought my mom backstage. And I had met him a couple times before, not that he would remember, but I shook his hand and thanked him for everything. So he asked for one of my CDs. So I scuttled down to my dressing room and grabbed a CD, and I come back and hand him the CD. And he said, well, you got to sign it for me, dude. And I'll never forget signing to B.B. King. Good luck with your music, David Gogo. But she gave me a weird look. But you're right. Like B.B. just kind of wanted, near the end of his life, just wanted to sit there and sing "You Are My Sunshine" and stuff, And he was just like, at a, part of his life where he was leaving. Whereas Buddy Guy, a year ago, I played down at the Big Blues Bender in Las Vegas, and the first time I saw Buddy Guy was probably, I was underage, so probably like mid to late 80s. I saw him at Arpo's nightclub in Victoria, and it was back when blues was just kind of going through a low ebb, and he had to do 2 sets in this club, and in between sets, he just sat at the edge of the stage. I bought him a whiskey and sat with him and bullshitted with him. So, but when we saw him in Vegas last year, it was one of the best shows I've ever seen Buddy Guy do, like in terms of guitar playing, in terms of singing, in terms of everything. And he's well into his 80s, and he's still kicking ass and taking names.
It is remarkable to see how these guys can carry on, and especially, like, I don't know if you read BB's book about the the Chitlin circuit and all of the touring and all of the stuff that happened, and no doubt all of these guys, Albert King, and the blues was the road on the blues was a heavy part of the blues, and the lifestyle, and it was grueling and painful, and in so many ways, and you were fighting for your money and all kinds of stuff.
Well, I co-wrote a song with a guy named Tom Hambridge. Now, Tom is a drummer and singer, but he's also a record producer, and he's produced Johnny Winter records, George Thorogood records, and he's kind of Buddy Guy's right-hand man now. So we wrote a song actually with Johnny Winter in mind called Never Gonna Change, and it's about that life on the road as a blues man. And for whatever reason, Johnny did not record it, but Buddy Guy ended up recording it. And it sounds just like we wrote it for Buddy Guy, because it's just about that whole thing of being on the road since, a teenager. And the thing about this kind of music is it's not really by choice that we do it, even though we love it. It's more like you have to do it. Like Tom Wilson, he of the Blackie and the Rodeo Kings and Junk House and etc. He told me one time, he said, he goes, you're like me. We have to do this. We're lifers. Like, we just have no choice. This is what you do. You play music, and you go out on the road and you play it for people, and hopefully they dig it.
And you play the same way. So it doesn't matter if there's 14 people in the house, or if there's 1,400 people in the house, or 14,000. You play it the same way. You got to play it the same way, because that's what comes out of you, right?
That's the big trick, yeah, is to keep that attitude. I think I do that, and I have done that in the past. So, yeah, you got to be prepared for both situations.
I giggle at your description of yourself, the self-deprecating aspect of it. 6-time Juno loser.
Yeah.
Instead of saying 6-time
nominee.
Juno nominee. And I say, I mean, we know each other. The humor is there, and I recognize it and stuff. But is there a certain amount of confidence that you are still trying to reach, and sometimes insecurities might overtake the confidence? Do you find a struggle between the two, even though it's self-deprecating and you got a great sense of humor? Do you find sometimes there is that doubt that creeps in from time to time?
Well, I think if you don't have a little bit of doubt, then you don't care, and you're not going to give it all to what you're doing. I mean, I do that every night before I go on stage. I get nervous. I mean, to a certain degree, I've been doing it long enough that, I'm not going to be getting physically ill or anything, but you want to have those nerves. You want to have the butterflies, because if you don't, then maybe you should be doing something else, because this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to do it the best we can. And you should have that anticipation. You should have that bit of excitement. But, when you've been doing it for as long as I have, yeah, you can maybe start to believe some of the dark side of the humor. Like, that being said, and I'm glad you asked me about the new album, is because like with my new album, I'm getting the best reviews of my career, having the most fun I've ever had playing songs. And not to, say anything bad about the records I have made or the people I have worked with in the past, but there's just something about this new one where there's just such a great energy. And the nice thing is having people I've known in the business for a very long time who have no reason to blow smoke or anything, just telling me like, wow, I didn't expect this. This is, I think, your best album. So as long as you can keep getting, that kind of recognition, that kind of accolades, like you can still keep writing it. It's not like I'm going, well, hey, 23 years ago, I put out this fucking record, man, and they played it on CFox, and you're not living in the past. I tend to be forward thinking and like, hey, what are we doing next? And it's just fun to have some new songs to play as well.
It's, you know what I discovered upon my umpteenth time listening to it is it's a great housework album. I don't know who can sit and listen to an album anymore, sitting just doing nothing. Like there's so much going on. There's always something that has to happen. But I just found that there is a rhythm to the album. There is a move to the album that goes with vacuuming, that goes with the stuff. And I just found myself cleaning, and then all of a sudden it was over, and my Spotify thing ran into some other guy doing a cover of a ZZ Top song, and I thought, what the hell's going on here? It is a terrific album. I've been thoroughly enjoying it, as I have with many of your, what do you got, a dozen albums now? Or 13?
I think this is like 17 or something. Yeah. So it's crazy. You know, to try to keep things fresh, try to keep people interested. Yeah. So, and that's why I left my comfort zone for this record and went to Ontario and recorded with some people that I haven't really recorded with. Let Steve Mariner take over the production and choose who the players are going to be. And there's a spontaneity and an energy that really happened, and you can hear it on the album.
From what I understand, you traveled light with this record. You didn't even did you take one guitar or none of your own gear?
Yeah, it was weird. And here's just the reality of being a traveling musician, especially in Canada, when you're on a certain budget, is I was going out to record for 10 days in just outside of Cobourg, Ontario, at that Ganaraska recording company with Jimmy Boskill Studio. Jimmy was in the Sheepdogs for a while, and he's now in Blue Rodeo and does his own thing. Anywho, I had to do that for 10 days. Then I had to whip up to Ottawa, had a show to play in Constance Bay, just west of Ottawa. Nice sold-out gig at the community center. And then from there, I was heading down to Roatan in Honduras.
Mm-hmm.
So to pack your suitcase for those situations, live music, recording, tropical, fun. It was difficult to fit everything in one suitcase. So I just brought my one guitar, which is a guitar I hadn't played in a long time, my old Sticker Stratocaster. I switched to a Les Paul a while ago. So I just had the one guitar. But Jimmy Boskill in his studio has a collection of vintage instruments like you wouldn't believe. So I would just say to him, okay, on this next song, it's kind of a ballad, Jimmy, and I need a real good woody sounding acoustic guitar, like a real kind of a strummer. You go, okay, play me a bit of the song. So I just play him a bit on the guitar I had, and he'd run upstairs and come back with like a 1958 Martin acoustic, and I'd, ring, hit that chord. Oh God, that's it. Oh, this next one, we want kind of a 70s rock sound. Oh, here's a 68 Les Paul. Like he just had every guitar for the situation. So that was fun too. And that was fun for me because I was like a kid in a candy store.
Well, I guess, and your collection of guitars is of note as well. Some of your do you have multiple resonators? Or I remember you telling me the story you got one from the 20s or?
Yeah, I've got one. One's a 1930. That's the metal body. So it's a brass body, nickel plated. That's one I gig with them. And then I have a 1935 wood body National. It's called a National Trojan, which is in really wicked shape. But yeah, I've got a lot of guitars. And that's so if I record the albums in Nanaimo, I can always bring whatever guitars I need for that day, whether it's an old Gibson or a certain acoustic guitar. So that was a big thing for me to leave and do that. But I knew that Jimmy had these great guitars. So, and then the other thing was we just, with the exception of one song, everything was just guitar straight into an amp. And we had a little vintage Fender amp, sometimes a Gibson. But we keep those upstairs because we recorded in an old farmhouse. So that was the cool thing about it too, was I stayed there. So we stayed there and played there. So you're just outside of Cobourg, Ontario, a little farming community called Baltimore, of all things. But, there's no one to disturb you. You're just there to make the record. So you stay there, you cook breakfast there, you hang out. There's tons of guitars, there's pianos, drums, like you just create. So that was the nice thing about it. So we just keep these amplifiers stuck in various bedrooms and one in the bathrooms, and just put a microphone up high in the corner for ambience and one right on the goddamn amp itself, and just crank it. So no pedals or anything, just everything, just pin everything to 11.
You could always tell when somebody's on the phone in their bathroom, can't you? Because of those acoustics.
It's a special time, isn't
it? Having a microphone or an amplifier in the bathroom. Is it? Well, was it your own little Big Pink, like the band?
I know I talk about my bathroom habits.
Yeah. Because the band, the Big Pink, wasn't that named after the house or something?
And a lot of the British bands did the same thing. Like they rather than go to a traditional recording studio, like Led Zeppelin would rent Mick Jagger's manor house out in the country, that kind of thing. And the Stones did it. And yeah, music from Big Pink, there's just a vibe to doing it that way.
The Led Zeppelin 4, When the Levee Breaks, was he not? Was John Bonham was playing drums in the atrium of this old thing, and they were using the Stones' mobile studio parked out in front to record that, did they not?
That is correct, yeah.
Trying to remember.
So a very similar vibe to that, yeah. Yeah, using the natural acoustics of the structure, like of the building.
The recording of a record, a full record, Is that still your preference, or do you sometimes find yourself, hey, I'm going to record a song, and because that seems to be the way. I'm going to record a song, put it on YouTube, and hope it goes bananas, which is quite often what happens. But I find the purists and the veterans and the stuff I like more as an album, so you get a feel, a sense of where the person is at the time of the recording.
Yeah, it's difficult. Al Pacino told me not to name drop, but I got a phone call about 6 months before we started recording this album from Miles Goodwin, the late Miles Goodwin, he of the April Wine.
Yes.
So we'd kind of become buddies over the last couple of years. I played on one of his blues records, but he just kind of phoned me out of the blue and said, what are we doing? And he goes, he said, I saw on Facebook that you're writing for a new album. And he's saying, is it even worth recording an entire album? Because, it costs a certain amount of money to do that. And then how do you monetize it if there's no record stores? How do you monetize it if commercial radio stations aren't allowed to play your songs anymore when they could 15 years ago? Why are we recording albums when a fucking rental car doesn't even have a CD player in it? There's a lot of just practical questions. And I think, once again, it's because we have to. For this new album, we did one kind of like a cyber single, a song called You Used to Mean So Much to Me. And that was for two reasons. Number one, it was kind of a stopgap between sessions. It had been a while since I did a record. And it was also, I recorded that with Steve Mariner and Jimmy Boskill. And it was kind of it was an experiment to see if I could work with those guys, get out of my comfort zone and go to Ontario and be put in that situation to see if it would work. And it did. But unfortunately, it's hard to monetize that kind of thing because you can tell all the people you want, hey, we got a song, it's the new single, it's out. But if no one decides to contribute or donate, then, next thing you know, you're displaying to everyone that you just spent, $5,000 on a fucking song that they can all hear for free. So it's difficult. But that being said, if you just want to look at it in terms of art, we want to make a great record. And that's with this album too, is realizing, okay, what's kind of been killing the music business? Well, musicians are complete fucking idiots and they'll undercut each other all the time. They'll willfully bend over and take it with anyone that doesn't want to pay you. It's silly. But also there's this self-indulgence. Ever since the CD came out, if people, instead of having 10 songs on a record, now it's 21 songs or 23 songs. Just because you can record 90 minutes of music or content doesn't mean that you maybe should. I think this new record's maybe 40 minutes. And all the records that I liked as a kid were about 40 minutes, 42 minutes.
It's funny you bring that up because I did notice the length of the songs on there. And in the past, you would see new music coming up from bands, whether they be blues artists or pop or rock or anything like that. And some of the songs would be 4.5, 4:45, 5:15, whatever the case. I mean, if you're going to go back to the Boston and the Bad Company and Led Zeppelin and that kind of thing, that's one thing back then. But then you see the songs, because people's attention span is that much, slower. A lot of artists are recording songs that are in the 3:30, 3:15, 2:58, 2:55 sort of zone. Was that a conscious thing for you, or you just?
Somewhat, yeah. There was definitely a kind of a trim the fat, all killer, no filler attitude when we went in. And I think what maybe separates me and some of the fellows that I work with from other blues artists is we do try to think in terms of, would this be able to get some airplay? Are we, is this song too goddamn long? Maybe, and so that's what I prefer to do is make the albums that we record in the studio a little more concise. And then when you get out on the road and start playing live, you can maybe stretch out, let's take that solo on that third song and see where we can go with it,
The albums on your live shows is when you get to go up to the front of the stage and let your toes hang off the edge and show everybody how big your dick is with your guitar solo. So that's basically, I remember.
That's after the show.
That's the way you described it to my boy's guitar player at the time. I seem to recall those words spoken. I want to play my favorite part of the one song, and it made me burst out laughing. There you go. Get that mayonnaise out of the sun. And who took my towel? Yeah, the name of the record. David Gogo is my guest.
No, a lot of the vocals on this album were first takes, and actually we kept live stuff, which I've never really done. That song, we kind of finished the vocal, but Mariner says, we need something for the fade out. So, like, I like to hang out at Nanaimo River. This song's actually based more on the Shuswap River, in this place called the Cherryville Roadhouse. I like to play there once a year. We give her the river, and they got some nice waitresses there. But Nanaimo River. So Mariner says, okay, for the fade out, I was still at the vocal mic. He said, just say things that you would say at the river. So the first thing I said was, get that mayonnaise out of the sun. So that may be the first time that lyric's ever been recorded. And I just, they kept all of them. There's Where's the Baby, which I thought was good.
Where's the baby?
That it's hard to hear the one because Mariner's harmonica comes in. I go, where's the baby? And we only cut one because we kept, that guy's got to fuck off. I like that.
Yeah.
But the only one he cut was, I said, it's okay. You can't get pregnant if it's in the water. But that's the only one where Mariner went, I think we wanted to cut that one.
Oh, man.
But those are things I say at the river.
Well, we'll get more into that in just a moment. We'll be right back.
The podcast you are listening to is brought to you by The Terry Evans Show with Pete Potipko on Edmonton's Classic Rock, K97. You can listen to it from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday at 97.3 on your FM dial in Edmonton. If you are outside of the Edmonton market, you can listen online at k97.ca and click Listen Live anytime from 5 till 9 a.m. Mountain Time, Monday through Friday. The Terry Evans Show with Pete Potipko on Edmonton's Classic Rock, K97.
Reluctantly.
Get that mayonnaise out of the sun.
Good advice.
It is great advice. I always wonder about that at resorts, when you go to tropical resorts and you go to the banquet or the buffet style lunch thing and you order your burger, and then you get the ketchup and mustard that are in the squeeze pumps or whatever there. And then you go to the table and sit down with your lovely, and you look over and you can see the salt and pepper. And then there's that mayonnaise sitting in that package out in the hot sun. I've never understood why they don't have that on ice as well as ketchup.
When I was about 12 years old, we took a family vacation to Mexico. And they brought out the ingredients for the burger bar around 7:30 in the morning. And around noon, they're going to serve it. And I was going to grab a burger. My dad said, you can have one of those burgers? I said, yeah. And he goes, no, you're not. I said, why not? And he pointed at the jar of mayonnaise. He goes, see, that's been sitting out since 7 in the morning. And by the way, remember that iguana that was on the fence? I don't see him around either.
Yeah, the mayonnaise killed the iguana. We were talking about Giving Her at the River from the album Yeah, released in June of 2024. And it made me think of the many times that I've seen on your social media, Instagram, your well, shall we call it a proclivity, an inclination, a disposition to being nude at the river. Is it the Nanaimo River?
It is.
Your tendency and propensity for nudism at the Nanaimo River is off-putting for the neighbors, I'm sure. Are there any neighbors there, or is it just
They probably just wish that I was off-putting with my big gut. No, it's private property, so I might gross out a couple of aunties or sisters, but that's about it. No, I love it. I just love it. And when I'm on the road too, like I mentioned Cherryville, I remember not last summer, but the summer before, I believe it was. It took me about 4 or 5 days to get home from there. And finally, my son was sending me a text like, "Are you ever coming home?" But I just couldn't resist, man. Like I had to jump into every lake and every river I saw. So, and nude if I could get away with it. I don't want to get beat up or thrown in jail or both.
And there's a certain item of clothing, an article of clothing that you like to wear at the river that I guess allows the freedom underneath because it's not layered or anything like that. What did you call it?
We call it the man dress.
Okay, it is the man dress.
There's a story with the man dress. I did a gig about 10 years ago, and I was hired from a bunch of people for the Department of National Defense. And the idea was to rehearse at a military facility in Ontario, and then we were being shipped off to an undisclosed location in the Persian Gulf to entertain some of the people, some Navy people that were there. The boat was being fixed up or whatever, so they had a bit of time off, so we're going to entertain them. So we rehearsed for a few days in Trenton, Ontario. And then when we went to get picked up for the bus, I mean, we're going to this Persian Gulf. It was 45 degrees there or something. So I showed up in the morning for the bus wearing my man dress. Well, of course, everyone thought I was a silly goose. The head military guy, or our liaison with the military, said, okay, there's a problem with the bus we were going to take you to the airport with, but they're replacing the bus. The only thing is we're going to be half an hour late. So rather than feed you at the airport, we're just going to feed you in the mess hall, and then we'll take you to the airport. We'll have plenty of time. So I had to go to the mess hall with my man dress on and get my lunch. So a soldier comes up to me and goes, sir, permission to speak to you, sir. I said, go ahead, soldier. And he goes, sir, it takes a lot of balls to wear what you're wearing right now, sir. And I said, well, this is the freedom that you're fighting for, son. So thank you very much. But I'll tell you, when we got off that plane, it was 45 degrees, man. Everyone wished they had a man dress. No doubt.
I bet. Yeah. When you're doing your posts on your social media, you can follow him at Gogo Guitar on Instagram. You're also on the X, David Gogo Blues, I believe. Is that?
Yeah, Facebook's kind of my jam, my Facebook music group. That's the one where I, reach the most people. And I try to keep it a fairly clean show. I get a little bit crazier on the Twitter and the Instagrams.
The Nanaimo River that you go to, you found obviously a favorite little swimming spot, fishing hole / whatever it might be. Is that close to Gogo Mountain? Or do you always make reference to Gogo Mountain, the Christmas tree farm and the house and everything like that? What do you?
Yeah, it's like a 5-minute drive. So we used to have family property on another river spot, but that got lost in family chaos about 25, 30 years ago. So this is, it's like a 5-minute drive. So very, very close.
Do you have the Gogo Christmas tree farm still? Is that like I seem to recall. What do you have? Like the Ponderosa up there, or what?
Yeah. So we got where I live. My dad's got a house with one of my sisters, so we got 160 acres here. Then we got more down the road that used to be my uncle's and cousin's place. My dad acquired that from them. They were no longer interested in it. So, as a matter of fact, as we speak, my son's out there right now pruning Christmas trees with a machete out in the field, getting them all shaped up for Christmas. So, yeah, it's a big thing. It's a great way to kind of utilize the property. We've been here since 1897, and so it's great. It says you cut, so people come up and we hand them a saw, and that you can go out with grandma or whoever, or someone else's grandma. That's what I do these days. But we go out and they can pick any tree they like, and at the end of their little journey, they hand the saw back and give us some cash and Merry Christmas.
Do you have a Clark Griswold family?
We do have a Griswold. We try to do that. I take pictures because some people they go right to the very edge of the property, and seriously, I've seen like 17-foot long. So I usually try to take a picture and put it on my social media. It's a Griswold, and today's Griswold or the weekly Griswold, And it's funny because dealing with the public is like I work the front gate because I try to time it so I'm home for the busiest 2 weekends or a couple weekends, maybe 3 weekends of the year, depending on the calendar, just to kind of be the publicity guy or PR guy. Because I know my dad, people don't like it when he threatens to shoot their dogs and stuff like that when he works the front gate. So, but we've had a little bit of conflict. Like last year, there was one guy, and it was super busy. I'm trying to get 10 cars into the farm, 10 cars out. My son's working with me, and all of a sudden, this guy starts marching towards me, and you can tell he's on some kind of a mission. And he's one of these idiots that wears fucking shorts in winter, And so he starts walking up. I go, "Can I help you? May I help you, sir? I need to speak with Mike Gogo." And I said, "Well, if you walk that way where you just came, just go to the second house, and he's in the office. There's a big sign that says office. Well, I need to speak with someone that works for Mike Gogo." Well, same thing. Just go back there, second house. Then he just starts giving me a hard time. I go, "Hey, I'm trying to do a job here, buddy. If you want anything done, go to the second house, go to the office." So he starts walking away. Then he starts giving my son a hard time. Well, I lose it. I turn around and go, "Hey, why don't you fuck right off?" Well, this big line of people, he starts going to every car. "That man told me to fuck off. That man told me to fuck off." So the next car that comes up, the guy just howling. It's a guy I went to high school with. And he said, that guy's obviously nuts. And he pours me a big glass of wine that he just happened to have in his car. And he said, "I work with the public all the time. And here's my trick." He says, "When I deal with a guy like that, I say to him, you know what? My boss told me that once a year, I'm allowed to tell someone to go fuck themselves. And guess what? You're not the one. I'm not going to waste it on you." And that drives them really bananas, apparently. They want to be the one.
You're not good enough for my fuck off.
Yeah. You got to earn the fuck off.
So it's a big family operation then. Then I had no idea. And I had no idea that you had that much land on the island. It's close to Nanaimo.
Yeah, about 15 minutes from right downtown. So that's the other thing is it's close enough. it looks like you're in the middle of nowhere, but you're not. You're 15 minutes from downtown. So people can come up here and they feel like they're in winter wonderland, and it's cool. It's a family tradition for a lot of people in town.
With owning the family owned land for since what did you say, 1897?
Correct. Yeah.
Has anybody come kicking your tires or trying to, put in a resort or a golf course or saying, hey, it's time to go or anything like that? Is there
Yeah. In fact,
a Yellowstone moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the property on the road that I spoke of earlier that my cousins had. They decided they were going to sell it. They didn't even tell my dad. My dad's helped them out from, a lot over the years. And, he's just said to them, "Were you guys not going to give me a heads up or what?" He now owns it, and they're probably kicking themselves because he logged a big part of it and more than paid for the property. But he right away replanted it. And now we've got, because as the Christmas tree demand has grown, as the city's grown, now we've got the extra property to grow because, it takes 7 years to grow a tree. So you got to plan ahead.
Do you replant and then so that it's like, is it that long that this has been happening with the Christmas tree?
Yeah.
So you juniors out there planting and hacking them up with a machete and everything.
Yeah. And I'm rolling over and farting and setting my alarm for 10:30 a.m. so I can make your fucking interview.
Oh man. How is your boy? How old is he now?
He's 25 years old.
Is that right, man?
It's difficult to believe, this, they grow up so fast, these little buggers. But I'm in the fortunate situation where him and his old lady, they live with me. They live up here on the farm, and they dig it. I mean, he was playing some drums as well, like your son, and playing a bit of music. It's tough because kids their age are really, it's a weird generation, And he did a few gigs, but the people, they just don't take it as serious as he was taking it. So he does a lot of other stuff. But in terms of just like working here on the farm, I mean, he's got a good, healthy job. They're out there every day getting fresh air and exercise and everything. And so it's nice to have him around for sure. Because, when he was a little guy, I was on the road a lot, like going to Europe for a month and stuff like that. And that can be difficult. So it's kind of fun to hang out now and do the thing. But yeah, it's a big family affair for sure.
So you mentioned your son's mother, and I just saw on your Instagram, what the fuck is with the divorce thing? Do you want to talk about that? Or you put it on your social media, so I figure it's not a taboo topic to bring up. You thought you were divorced, but you weren't?
Yeah, that was a different woman. I was married to that woman. We never lived together. That was a weird thing. We never lived together, but we were married. But about 6 years ago, she just said to me, "Hey, I don't think this is working. Like, there's a thing called an uncontested divorce. We just go in to the law courts and sign their phony baloney forms and give them their phony baloney fee." And I said, "Yeah, okay, I can do that." So we met up at the law courts and did the whole thing. And it was $300 and something, all told. So I said, "Okay, I'll pay for it." She goes, "No, I want to split it with you." I said, "No, my love, we can, I'll pay for it." No. So she insisted. So we split the fee. I walked her to her car, farewell. And it was about 9:30 in the morning. And I knew that one of the old coal miner bars in Nanaimo was open. The Palace. I know they're open at 9 a.m. Royal Bank doesn't open until 10:30, but the Palace is open at 9. So I walked down to the Palace and I walked in there and the owner says, "Mr. Gogo, you're in here awfully early. What's going on?" I said, "Well, I'm just celebrating my $137 divorce." And he just goes like this and grabs a bottle of tequila and pours big water glasses full of tequila and goes, "Tell me of your ways." But that was 6 years ago. And she got back in touch with me a while ago and said, "I never got that letter back signed by the judge and everything. You mail the stuff off and you're supposed to get it back." So we looked into it and there was some silly clerical error. And I guess they tried to send a letter for whatever reason. It didn't make it to us. See, we got married in a place called Forget, Saskatchewan, spelled forget. Just there's a little bit of fucking foreshadowing there. But they filled out on the form Forget SK rather than Saskatchewan. Like, I don't know what the fuck else SK stands for. Right. But so for 6 years, we thought we were divorced and we haven't been. So we just rectified that. We're just waiting to now get the papers back. But yeah, so my son said to me, "So you haven't been married to her for 6 years?" I said, "Yeah." And we were trying to do the body count on that one, and it was pretty grim.
That's just that's a crazy story that can only happen to you. I can't even imagine if I remember you came in on the radio show one time and you told the story about you and the Avola in Avola at the Login pub, and the story the way you told the story, it was just I couldn't like I just waited for the next thing to happen. And that's one of the things I was looking forward to talking to you today because of your great storytelling and all of the stories.
Well, yeah, and that's one thing
Yeah.
I had to do is get a book, and that's why I started my podcast, was just to try to jog my memory of some of these things. Because when you've been doing crazy things for 30+ years, I mean, I just realized the other day one of my big fans in Quebec, Robert Daou, mentioned, because I said, hey, I was the first act to ever play Ottawa Blues Festival. Well, that was 94. So my first album came out in 94, 30 years in the business. Ay caramba. Seems like yesterday. But, to get all those stories, it just kind of jog the memory. But, I don't think it's an egotistical thing. I think it's that there's actually some interesting shit, whether it's sleeping on Stevie Ray Vaughan's hotel room floor or dating a chick that used to be is your ex-wife's twin sister's best friend.
Your ex-wife's twin sister's best friend.
It's always fun.
I smell a blues song.
I wrote a couple.
We'll be right back.
This podcast, reluctantly, brought to you by Just for Feet. Just for Feet. Just around the corner from the Sally Ann. No pants, no hats, no jackets. None of that stuff's for feet. Just for feet. Don't come to us looking for gloves.
Reluctantly.
You mentioned briefly sleeping on the floor of Stevie Ray Vaughan's hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
Stevie Ray Vaughan just earlier this month would have been 70 years old. So that means it's 35 years since we lost him.
Yeah, I find that hard to believe. Just thinking in terms, I'm 55. That poor guy only made it to 35. Really? It's just like like to me, I guess that's just what it's like when you're a certain age. People 10, 15 years old are always seem like way, way older. I'm older now by a long time than he ever was, 20 years than he ever was. Yeah, I mean, it's at the point, and the same thing about writing a book. I started working with different musicians. I've got my band on Vancouver Island. I've got another band in Ottawa that I've worked with for probably 20 years now. But I'm starting to work with different prairie musicians, because that's just the reality of the Canadian music business, is you can't afford to bring a whole band across Canada. Anywho, as I start working with these new players, there's a bit of windshield time driving to the next gig. So I'll just happen to, Stevie Ray Vaughan will come up, and I'll start talking about my times that I got to spend with him. And you can see some of the younger guys like, oh my God, it's like when I used to hear guys talk about hanging out with Jimi Hendrix when I was a kid, because he's been gone for that long. So, if you're a 30-year-old guy or a guy in your 30s, you never got a chance to see Stevie Ray Vaughan. I got a chance to hang out with the man. I got a chance to, luckily I've got a couple photographs of when I was a punk kid. I got a belt he gave me. But the nice thing was even though at the time he was totally my hero, because I was 14 or 15 years old, he also taught me lessons in how to, humility and how to just take things in stride. Don't believe all the good hype. Tom Cochrane, same thing. If you believe all the good things that they tell you and all the smoke are going to blow up your ass, then when someone says something bad about you, it's going to be devastating. But if you take everything with a grain of salt and try to take constructive criticism, take a certain amount of praise or accolades or whatever, but, don't take it all too serious. That's the main thing. It's just do what you do and do it the best you can.
With Stevie Ray Vaughan, of course, the history is there. You talk about ebbs and flows and ups and downs and all of the things that he dealt with addiction and everything like that. And the fact that he was, somebody you looked up to and you met at a young age, and how much you learned from him. You learn from the good and from the bad too, don't you?
Yeah, and I think the big reason why, I've had my struggles with booze and stuff over the years, because it's just kind of in the business. I always steered clear of drugs, and I think a big reason was because of the struggles that guys like Stevie, or way back to Hendrix. When I used to read books about Hendrix, whenever he had a shitty gig or had to leave after 3 songs, or it was always seemed to be a thing to do with drugs. And I saw it up close and personal with Stevie, but I also saw him after he recovered. So it was pretty amazing to see that happen, because I saw him in a couple situations that were pretty down and out, But luckily he had some people with him that made sure that he was okay at the end of the night every night. But, it's just part of that business and the way they grew up. I mean, we did a couple of shows opening for Dickie Betts, the late Dickie Betts of the Allman Brothers. Wow, yeah. I mean, he was still an animal, like in his 70s. And that's just the way he grew up. You just figured you got to drink a bottle of Jack Daniels and do an 8-ball and punch your girlfriend after the show. Otherwise, you're not a rock star, So
it's so
weird.
funny. It is weird, and I remember Dickie Betts seeing the Allman Brothers, and the one show that I saw them at the Shaw Conference Center in Edmonton, and it was just when you didn't think it could get to anything further of a crescendo, there was just so much more that came out of Dickie and Greg, and I mean, it was unbelievable. And then after the show that night, Greg Allman, I went up and met him, and I had a pack of Marlboro Golds, and there was one cigarette left in it, and I had a Sharpie, and the only thing I had to write on was that pack of Marlboros. I said, hey, would you mind signing my cigarette pack? He goes, yeah, sure. So, I gave it to him, and he took it in his hand, and he wrote on it, Greg Alm, and the A-N was on his finger. So the autograph that I had from Greg Allman was Greg Alm on my Marlboro Lights pack, and the rest of his signature was on his finger. But Dickie Betts, he absolutely blew me away the one time that I did see the Allman Brothers.
Oh, he was so good, man. He was so good. Yeah. We got to see him throw a Les Paul once in Rochester, New York, at his Guitar Tech. That was pretty wild. We saw him do some pretty wild stuff, considering he only did a couple of shows with him.
Yeah. You know what? You're talking about Stevie Ray Vaughan, how the fact that he was 35 when he was taken from us. It just put me in the mind. I just happened with Jake E. Lee, who took over from Randy Rhoads, playing guitar for Ozzy Osbourne, who Jake E. Lee is now 73 years old to date the podcast, but recently suffered gunshot wounds while walking his dog at like 2:46 in the morning in Las Vegas. But he took over from Randy Rhoads when Randy Rhoads died at 25. So you think about Stevie Ray Vaughan, Randy Rhoads, obviously Jimi Hendrix and the 27 Club, how much more they could have given if they would have become the age of an Albert Collins or a Johnny Winter or Buddy Guy or something like that.
Yeah, well, even we just talked about the Allman Brothers. I mean, Dwayne Allman was 24. And, I listened to those records and the stuff he accomplished, not just the Allman Brothers, but, he did the Derek and the Dominoes record with Clapton. He did Aretha Franklin sessions, King Curtis, like just on and on. A just ridiculous amount. I mean, these guys they worked hard. Yeah. And Dwayne's one of the guys I wish I could have seen play live. But yeah, 24, I can remember.
One of your podcasts I listened to was Canada's own Colin James, and it was from was it earlier this year, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it was about 6 months ago or something.
Was it? Yeah. So obviously car accident on the East Coast during his Eastern U.S. tour. But the Soul Bender podcast is up and going, and you've had all kinds of awesome guests and great conversations and storytelling on that. As we're talking about, guys like Dickie Betts and Stevie Ray Vaughan, obviously people who you would give almost anything if you could sit and speak to them for an hour, as you and I are talking right now. Who are some of the people that you have had on your podcast, on the Soul Bender podcast, that have been amazing, and people that you still have the opportunity perhaps to and want to visit with?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I think about it now. All that time I spent hanging out in the Winnebago with Johnny Winter, I could have had a great podcast with that. So I'm trying to get more. The podcast started off more to me talking about my career and my experiences, and then as that started to run out somewhat, I thought, well, it'd be great to talk to some of these fellow artists, not just speaking for the story, but just to record it for posterity. And there's actually been a couple of people that are no longer with us that are on the podcast, but yeah, Dickie would have been someone. Getting Colin James was great. I've known Colin off and on for a long, long time. My buddy Mariner's playing with him now. So it was a really relaxed thing, and it was during the day in a hotel suite. That was a nice one. One of my favorites is a guy named Gene Carr. Now, Gene just passed away a couple of months ago. He played in the NHL. He was picked 1971, I believe, was the year. So the first overall pick was Guy Lafleur. Number 2 was Marcel Dion. Number 3 was Jocelyn Gouvernement. Number 4 was Gene Carr. So he ended up playing in the NHL in the early 70s. His glory years playing for the LA Kings in the mid 70s, where he befriended Glenn Frey and hung out with the Eagles all the time. And they wrote New Kid in Town, basically about Gino. And so that's an interesting interview from a person that's not a musician, but hung out with a lot of musicians. And just to, be there in that era, be playing for the LA Kings in the 70s and partying with all those folks. That's a pretty neat interview. But I just try to keep my eyes and ears open. Who's in town? Who would I have access to? And, it's mostly blues artists. But they've got some good stories, man.
You know how to bring them out of people as well. Just listening to the way you handle yourself. You mentioned the fact that you at first it started just being about you and your career and things that happened to you, and you're a terrific storyteller. I've been witness to that many times on the radio show, and again today for that matter. But the fact that you've been able to take your storytelling and all of the things that revolve around you and deal with you specifically with your career, and you've been able to kind of twist that so that it's a receptive thing, and then you're able to contribute because you have that kind of connection through what you do, and it being so similar to what the people you're interviewing are doing. So I think it's terrific. You listen, and that's key in interviewing someone, is listening to them instead of trying to find a place to say what you want to say next or ask the next question.
Could you repeat that? I wasn't listening. Set me up, eh? Well, I'm a big fan of reading musicians' biographies or autobiographies.
Oh yeah,
and some are great, and some are the shits. And that's a big thing. I watched once a thing with Larry King, and they asked him, what's the trick of being such a, being a person who interviews people for a living, and the longevity that he's had. And he said, yeah, listen, and also try the least amount. Try not to say me or I. Like, don't make it about you. Make it about them. That being said, because I'm in the music business, I think that's what lets a lot of these people's guards down. Is they know I'm in the business, and they know I've been at it for a long time. So, I'm going to ask them the questions they want to hear rather than what kind of strings do you use and that kind of stuff. But I do use the I and the me sometimes, just if I can relate to them in terms of whatever story they're telling or situation they've been in the business, because I've been in the business for a long time. And that's what makes it fun. Like whether it's Sean Varro from Wide Mouth or someone like that, we have a certain relationship. We've seen each other on the road over the years, and there's just things that we can relate to. But that's the big thing too, is listening and knowing where to take the interview, like what direction should we go, and trying to avoid certain things that maybe they don't want to discuss, and that's good to maybe do that before the interview. One thing that was surprising was one of the people that I interviewed. Apparently, I went into kind of uncharted territory that I wasn't aware of, but they went with it just because they felt more relaxed with me rather than just Joe Blow from the Peterborough Times or whatever.
You mentioned Sean Varro from Wide Mouth Mason. That guitar is beautiful, isn't it?
Oh man, he's such a killer player.
The one he just got, the paint is, what is it? Is it Mo? Or, I don't even know. Is it periwinkle?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. I'm sure I made some facetious comment about it on social media. It's kind of what would you, lavender maybe?
Lavender or periwinkle?
Yeah. Well, he's just such a killer player. He does this weird thing where he wears 3 different slides on his fingers. So when you play slide guitar, I use a bottleneck, like a glass bottleneck. You can use metal or whatever you want. So I usually just use it on my pinky. Well, he's got 3. So I was doing a show with him a year or so ago, and it was I was on the bill, he was on the bill, and I think Brandon Isaac. But in the middle of the show, I filmed a bit of it, and I sent it to my buddy Russell Broom. Russell plays with Jan Arden, and he produces tons of great records. Like he's a really well-known guy and like respected guy. He just said, "Don't show me that." I said, "Here's you should go Sean Varro. He does 3 slides. Don't show me that." So that just shows. Yeah, okay.
Russell Broom came up to Grant MacEwan Community College and did a thing, and my son got to play drums with him.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, when Riley was still enrolled at Grant Mac.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a great player.
The Wide Mouth Mason stuff was always fun. Did you ever have the desire or want for a gigantic pink Trojan condoms bus?
Condoms
Did you ever
are for
come
sailors.
close?
Condoms are for sailors. They, I remember when they did that, they got an endorsement. Well, why not? I tried to get an endorsement with Chivas Regal for years. So why not endorse what you like, right?
Yeah.
Condoms and scotch.
I remember that condom pulled up in front of the Sidetrack Cafe in Edmonton, and it was all of the buzz that night. They played at the Sidetrack with White Mountain.
Oh man, they would have killed it that night too, man. The Sidetrack. I mean, I was thinking that the other day when I'm finally getting to go back to Edmonton. I'm thinking about the places I played because someone was asking me that the other day. And Sidetrack, that was a gooder for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, God, I started playing off. We played it. It was called the Power Plant at the university.
Yes,
That's where I started playing. And there was a place called Andante's for a minute.
Andante's, yes.
Just off of White Ave.
Mm-hmm.
I never did play the commercial. We played mostly at the university because when I started off, we were kind of younger guys anyway. So we started playing. Yeah, we played more. That was still our crowd, and then moving on to the Sidetrack, and then you try to be. I mean, that's what I found in this business in the last few years. Is a lot of people are being proactive. If there's not a good venue, create one. Like I did that a few years ago because we hadn't played in Edmonton, and they just knocked the Sidetrack down. I was hanging out with a friend of mine in Edmonton who lives up kind of in that area around the Chateau Louis and that. And he said, well, I got a friend who's got this place, the B Street Bar. So we just went up there and had a beer, talked to the guy. He goes, yeah, let's do a show. So I said, well, I'll just do it for the ticket money. And Jesus Christ, like we sold it out in about a week. And then the guy loved it. Were you there the night where he brought in a bison? He actually smoked a bison in the parking lot.
I don't remember if I was there you played there 2 nights, I think, a Friday and a Saturday. And I was there
I think we had it at night.
If I remember correctly, but I remember it being packed and sweaty.
Oh,
and seeing you up there doing your thing. And yeah, it was awesome. But that's what the blues is all about, being a sweaty, packed bar, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, he got so excited. He's Macedonian, the owner. So he got so excited with with selling out. And apparently he had to shoot the bison himself. He went out to some bison farm. And then they brought it in. Like they cooked it in the parking lot for a day or so. I thought it'd be dry as hell, but we were eating it on stage, like in between songs. But they just brought it in a pole, and they put plywood and paper down on the pool table. It was fucking medieval. It was great.
Oh my God!
But he told me the difference between a buffalo and a bison.
Mm-hmm.
A buffalo is a large, hairy beast that roams the plains of North America, and a bison is something that an Australian washes his face in.
That's why we don't do jokes on the show. When's the last time you bought a pair of Fluvog shoes?
You know what? Funny you should mention that. I was looking at some Fluvogs on a lovely woman the other day. It has been a long time. Their designs, I mean, I hate to say this, and if I'm blowing my endorsement, well, God damn it, you should have gone on it 10 years ago. None of their designs have really particularly been able to float my boat in the last few years. And if you're throwing out that kind of cash, you want to look kind of good. My dad showed up some crazy footwear a while ago that he just saw on Facebook or something, and he ordered it for me. But my Fluvogs I keep in immaculate condition. They only go on stage. I actually went to the Fluvog store in Victoria about a year or so ago, and they had a display, and it was called like Vintage Vlog or something. And it was like basically every pair of shoes I'd ever bought from them, and that's now their museum. I like the nice footwear though.
Well, you know what? You mentioned the fact that you're 55. You're chasing me. I'm going to be 60 this year. Yeah, I know. So you're going to have to take a couple of things into consideration. Your nostril hairs will start growing way faster than they used to. And if you can find Velcro Fluvogs, do it.
We'll look for those. The nose hair thing, I took care of that last weekend. I played on Quadra Island, and they had a prime rib dinner special, and that horseradish. Woo!
Oh, nice.
Yeah, just burnt it right under there. Just snorted me a couple radish lines, and that was good.
DavidGogo.com for all things Gogo. You can even buy vinyl there, all kinds of nifty stuff. Gogo Guitar on Instagram, on Facebook. We've just basically skimmed the surface of what we could have spent together as far as time goes and all of the conversations. Remind people of the new album, which is on your favorite streaming services and in stores now. You can also buy it at davidgogo.com. Edmonton Blues Society, November 30th at St. Basil's here in Edmonton. And, of course, the Soulbender podcast. It's always great to catch up with you. Always good to see your smiling face, man.
Likewise. And the cats haven't intervened too much. We got Pete, who fought a cougar a couple of weeks ago. You say you follow my social media. My son and his girlfriend let the cats outside the other day, and out of nowhere, a big goddamn cougar ran right at them. And Pete, the mom cat, just turned around and they went toe-to-toe. They wrestled, they rolled about 5 times down the driveway and disappeared into the forest. We thought she was gone forever, but she came back 2 days later. So she started to make some noise, aren't you, Pete? So we'll just be careful because, I mean, she fought a cougar, man. And it's not the kind of cougars that usually hang out at my house.
I guess not.
She likes them.
All right, man.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, love you, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Rock on.
Reluctantly.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the new album from David Gogo. Yeah. Available now on Cordova Bay Records. David Gogo has 6 Juno Award nominations and has been named Guitarist of the Year 3 times at the Maple Blues Awards. Yeah. Available now on all streaming platforms and at davidgogo.com.
Reluctantly.